November 8th, 1991, 6:23 a.m. FBI New York Field Office, 26 Federal Plaza. Special Agent Frank Spiro pressed play on the tape recorder. The room went silent. 4 FBI agents, 2 federal prosecutors, and 1 man who just agreed to destroy the most powerful mobster in America. The voice that came through the speakers was rough, Brooklyn thick, unmistakable. John wanted it done clean. No witnesses. We took him to the warehouse on Bedford Avenue. I put 2 in his head. John put 1 in the chest. We wrapped him in a tarp, put him in the trunk, drove to Staten Island, buried him in a construction site. Foundation got poured the next morning. He's been there ever since. The speaker? Salvatore, Sammy the Bull Gravano. John Gotti's underboss. His best friend. His brother. The man who'd stood beside Gotti through 15 years of war, 19 murders, and 3 federal trials. And now, sitting in that FBI office in a rumpled tracksuit, unshaven and exhausted, Sammy the Bull was doing something nobody thought possible. He was telling the truth. All of it. Agent Spiro stopped the tape. That's murder number 7. We've got 12 more on tape. Plus racketeering, extortion, conspiracy. With your testimony, we can put Gotti away for life. Sammy nodded slowly. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the weight of what he was about to do. Destroy the man who'd made him rich, made him powerful, made him somebody. The man he'd called brother. I need protection, Sammy said quietly. When this comes out, every made guy in New York will want me dead. You'll have it, Spiro replied. Witness protection. New identity. Your family's safe. But Sammy, once you testify, there's no going back. You understand that. Sammy looked at the tape recorder, looked at the agents, looked at the future he'd just chosen. I understand. What nobody in that room could have predicted was this. Sammy the Bull's testimony wouldn't just destroy John Gotti. It would destroy the entire foundation of the American mafia. The code of omerta, the sacred vow of silence that had held for 100 years, would shatter. And it would all start with 2 men who loved each other like brothers, until one of them decided survival mattered more than loyalty. This is the story of the greatest betrayal in organized crime history. To understand how Sammy Gravano became the man who destroyed John Gotti, you need to understand how they met. Because their friendship didn't start with power or money. It started with respect. March 1975, Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. John Gotti was 34 years old, a rising capo in the Gambino crime family running operations out of the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club in Queens. He was sharp, ambitious, charismatic. But he had a problem. The Colombo family was moving into his territory. Specifically, a crew run by Tommy DeBella was shaking down businesses on 86th Street that Gotti considered his. Gotti needed muscle. Smart muscle. The kind that didn't just break legs, but understood strategy. That's when he met Sammy Gravano. Sammy was 30, built like a fire plug, 5'5", barrel-chested, with hands like sledgehammers. He'd grown up in Bensonhurst, dropped out of school at 16, and by his 20s had earned a reputation as a fearless earner and a stone-cold killer. He'd already done time for assault. He ran a successful construction racket, and he had connections throughout Brooklyn that Gotti needed. They met at a social club on 18th Avenue. Gotti walked in wearing a tailored suit. Sammy was in jeans and a leather jacket. The contrast was immediate. Gotti extended his hand. John Gotti. I've heard good things. Sammy shook it. Firm grip. Eye contact. Sammy Gravano. What can I do for you? I've got a problem with Tommy DeBella's crew. They're taxing my businesses without asking. I need that to stop. Sammy lit a cigarette. Tommy's connected. You go after him. You're going after the Colombo family. I know who he's connected to, Gotti said. But he's not connected to me. And those are my streets. Sammy studied Gotti for a long moment. Most guys came to him looking for muscle. They were desperate or stupid. Gotti was neither. He was calculating, testing, seeing if Sammy was the kind of guy who'd back down from a fight. What's in it for me? Sammy asked. A partnership. You help me solve this problem. We work together. You keep running your crews in Brooklyn. I keep running mine in Queens. But when either of us needs help, we're there. No questions. Sammy crushed his cigarette in an ashtray. When do we start? 2 weeks later, Tommy DeBella's car exploded in a parking lot in Canarsie. He survived, but the message was clear. Gotti's territory was off-limits. The Colombo family backed off, and John Gotti and Sammy Gravano became partners. Over the next 10 years, their friendship deepened. It wasn't just business. They genuinely liked each other. Gotti was the strategist, the politician, the guy who could talk to anyone and make them feel like family. Sammy was the enforcer, the builder, the guy who got things done without needing a manual. They complemented each other perfectly. When Gotti decided to take out Paul Castellano in 1985 and seize control of the Gambino family, Sammy was the first person he told. December 2nd, 1985, a construction trailer in Staten Island. Gotti and Sammy sat alone, drinking espresso from paper cups. "Paul's gotta go," Gotti said quietly. Sammy didn't react, just waited for Gotti to continue. "He's weak. He doesn't respect the old ways. He's cutting deals with the feds, taxing us into the ground, and he's never even set foot in Little Italy. He's not a boss. He's a businessman in a tracksuit." "You're talking about killing the boss of the family," Sammy said. "You know what that means. If it goes wrong, we're both dead." "It won't go wrong," Gotti said. "Not if you're with me." Sammy leaned back in his chair. He'd known this conversation was coming. Castellano had been insulting the soldiers, ignoring the captains, making decisions that hurt earners like Sammy. The family was fracturing. "What's the plan?" Sammy asked. Gotti smiled. "I knew I could count on you." December 16th, 1985, 5:26 p.m. Spark Steakhouse, Manhattan. Paul Castellano and his underboss Tommy Bellotti pulled up in a black Lincoln Continental. They were there for a dinner meeting with the captains. They never made it inside. For shooters in identical trench coats and fur hats stepped out of the shadows. 17 shots in less than 10 seconds. Castellano and Bellotti died on the sidewalk in front of Christmas shoppers and tourists. John Gotti and Sammy Gravano sat in a car 1 block away. They watched the whole thing. Then they drove to a safe house in Queens. By January 15th, 1986, John Gotti was officially named boss of the Gambino crime family. Sammy Gravano was named underboss. They'd done it, together, and for the next 5 years, they ran New York like emperors. Gotti was the face, the celebrity, the dapper don who gave interviews, threw block parties, and charmed the tabloids. Sammy was the backbone, the guy who handled the money, settled disputes, kept the soldiers in line. They met every single day. Sometimes at the Rave Nights Social Club on Mulberry Street. Sometimes at construction sites Sammy owned. Sometimes just driving around Brooklyn in Sammy's Mercedes, talking about business, about family, about life. They were brothers, not by blood, but by choice. And in the mafia, that bond was supposed to be unbreakable. Supposed to be. The crack started in 1990. John Gotti beat his 3rd federal trial that February. The Teflon Don. Untouchable. The headlines made him a superstar, but the attention also made him reckless. Sammy noticed it first. Gotti was spending less time managing the family and more time managing his image, showing up at restaurants where photographers waited, giving quotes to reporters, playing the celebrity. Meanwhile, the FBI was getting smarter. Special Agent Bruce Mao and his Gambino squad had bugged the Rave Night Social Club. For 18 months, they recorded everything. Conversations about murders, extortion, rackets. And they recorded Gotti saying things that made Sammy nervous. On one tape from November 1989, Gotti was venting about Sammy to his consigliere, Frank Lacasio. "Sammy's getting soft," Gotti said. "He's worried about the feds. Worried about wiretaps. I don't need worried. I need earners." Sammy heard about the tape through an FBI leak. It stung. After everything they'd been through, Gotti was questioning his loyalty. Then came the arrests. December 11th, 1990. The FBI raided the Rave Night. Arrested Gotti, Sammy, and Frank Lacasio. The charges: racketeering, conspiracy, murder. The evidence: hundreds of hours of wiretap conversations. Sammy's lawyer came to see him in the Metropolitan Correctional Center 2 days later. They've got you on tape talking about 6 murders, the lawyer said. Gotti too. They're offering deals. Testify and you walk. Stay silent, and you're looking at life without parole. I'm not testifying, Sammy said immediately. That's not how this works. Sammy, they have you dead to rights. The tapes are clear. You and John discussing murders, beatings, extortion. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. So be it. The code of omerta was absolute. You don't cooperate. You don't testify. You go to prison, and you keep your mouth shut. That's what made guys in the life different from civilians. That's what made them men. Sammy believed that, had believed it his entire adult life. But then something happened that changed everything. In early 1991, the prosecution played more tapes for Sammy's lawyer. These weren't just about murders. These were John Gotti talking about Sammy. On one tape, Gotti said, "Sammy's a hothead. He thinks he's smarter than me. If he keeps running his mouth, I'm going to have to do something about it." On another, "Sammy don't understand business. He's good for muscle, but he's not a thinker." And the worst one, recorded in September 1990, Gotti talking to Frank Locascio. "If this case goes bad, and we need someone to take the fall, it's going to be Sammy. I'll throw him to the wolves if I have to." Sammy sat in his cell reading the transcripts. Over and over. The man he'd called brother. The man he'd killed for. The man he'd risked everything for. That man was ready to sacrifice him to save himself. The code of omerta was sacred, but John Gotti had broken it first. Not by testifying, by betraying the bond. Sammy made a decision. November 8, 1991. He called his lawyer. Set up a meeting with the FBI. "I'm ready to talk." The FBI couldn't believe it. Sammy the Bull, one of the most feared mobsters in New York, was willing to testify. But they needed proof he was serious. "Give us something we don't know," Agent Spiro said in that first meeting. Sammy gave them 19 murders. Detailed accounts. Dates, locations, methods. Some the FBI didn't even know had happened. And in every single one, he implicated John Gotti directly. "John and I killed Paul Castellano together. John ordered the hit on Louis Di Bono. I carried it out. John personally shot Eddie Garofalo in a basement in Queens." For 9 hours, Sammy talked. The FBI recorded every word, and when he was done, they had enough evidence to convict Gotti 10 times over. The deal was simple. Testify against Gotti and cooperate fully. In exchange, Sammy would serve 5 years instead of life, then enter witness protection with a new identity. Sammy agreed. The news broke on November 12, 1991. Sammy the Bull flips, Gotti's underboss, to testify. The mafia world exploded. Underbosses didn't flip. Sammy Gravano, of all people, didn't flip. This was unthinkable. Unprecedented. A violation of everything the mob stood for. But Sammy didn't care about the mob anymore. He cared about survival. And John Gotti, sitting in his cell at the MCC, reading the newspaper headline, finally understood what was coming. He was finished. The trial started January 21, 1992. United States District Court, Eastern District of New York. Judge Leo Glasser presiding. This time, there would be no theatrics. No expensive suits. The jury was sequestered, heavily guarded. No chances of tampering. And for the first time, John Gotti looked worried. The prosecution called their star witness on March 2, 1992. The United States calls Salvatore Gravano. The courtroom doors opened. Sammy walked in wearing a simple gray suit. No jewelry. No attitude. Just a man about to end a friendship and an empire. He sat in the witness chair, raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth. For 9 days, Sammy testified. He described 19 murders in excruciating detail. Explained how the Gambino family operated, named names, gave dates, provided evidence the FBI had never been able to obtain in 30 years. And through it all, John Gotti sat at the defense table, staring at his former best friend with a mixture of rage and disbelief. On the 5th day of testimony, Prosecutor John Gleason asked, "Mr. Gravano, how would you describe your relationship with John Gotti?" Sammy paused, looked directly at Gotti for the first time. "We were brothers. I loved him. I would have died for him. So why are you testifying today? Because he was ready to let me take the fall for everything. He broke the bond first. And if you break the bond, you break everything. The jury listened, took notes, and on April 2nd, 1992, after 13 hours of deliberation, they returned, guilty on all counts. John Gotti was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. He was sent to the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois. Solitary confinement, 23 hours a day in a 7x12 cell. He never spoke to Sammy Gravano again. Gotti died on June 10, 2002, from throat cancer. He was 61 years old. Sammy served 5 years, was released in 1995, and entered witness protection. But he couldn't stay clean. In 2000, he was arrested for running an ecstasy ring in Arizona. Sentenced to 20 years. Released in 2017. Today, Sammy Gravano is 79 years old, living in Arizona under his real name. He does podcasts, tells stories about the old days, sells merchandise with his face on it. John Gotti's legacy is a prison cell and a grave in Queens. And the Code of Omerta? It died the day Sammy the Bull testified. So what's the lesson here? First, loyalty is only as strong as trust. Gotti and Sammy built an empire on brotherhood. But the moment Gotti prioritized himself over that bond, the foundation cracked. You can't demand loyalty if you don't give it. Second, self-preservation always wins. Sammy faced life in prison. He could have stayed silent, honored the code, died in a cell. Instead, he chose survival. It's easy to judge from the outside. But when you're staring at forever behind bars, principles become negotiable. Third, the Code of Omerta was a lie. For 100 years, the mafia told itself that real men don't talk. But Sammy proved that anyone will talk if the price is right. And after him, dozens of mobsters followed. The code didn't collapse because of weakness. It collapsed because it was built on fear, not honor. Fourth, crime partnerships are business, not family. Gotti and Sammy thought they were brothers. But when the pressure came, they were just two criminals trying to save themselves. Real brotherhood survives prison. Business partnerships don't. The betrayal of John Gotti by Sammy the Bull wasn't just the end of a friendship. It was the end of an era. The mafia never recovered. Omerta became a joke. And every mobster after 1992 knew, if Sammy could flip, anyone could. John Gotti walked into federal court in 1992 believing he was untouchable. He walked out in handcuffs because the one person he trusted most decided survival mattered more than loyalty. And in the end, they both lost. Gotti died in prison. Sammy lives free, but he'll always be known as the rat who broke the code. There are no winners in betrayal, only survivors. If this story about loyalty, betrayal, and the price of survival hit you, smash that subscribe button. Drop a like if you understand that trust is earned, not demanded. Share this with someone who needs to remember that partnerships built on fear always collapse. What would you have done in Sammy's position? Honored the code and died in prison? Or testified and lived free? Let me know in the comments. Remember, you can build an empire on loyalty. But the moment trust breaks, the empire falls. Every single time.